All right, let's get right into it. We're about to take a pretty wild journey through the human brain. We're going to look at how it reacts to basically everything, from your morning cup of coffee all the way to some powerful hallucinogens. And for every single one, we're going to break it down into three parts: the promise, the peak, and the price, because there's always a price. So it all really boils down to this one simple question, one that I'm sure you felt even if you've only ever had a cup of coffee. Why does every single high eventually lead to a crash? Well, the answer isn't some super complex secret. It all comes down to one single, incredibly powerful biological rule. And that rule is called homeostasis. Think of your brain as this master accountant. It is obsessed with keeping the books balanced. It just hates being pushed too far in any one direction. Not too up, not too down. So every substance we're about to talk about, it's like a huge, unexpected entry in the ledger. And the brain will always push back to get everything back to zero. That right there, that's the key to understanding all of this. Okay, so first up, the stimulants. We're calling them the uppers. And the best way to think about these is like you're taking out a high-interest loan from your own brain. They give you a sudden burst of energy, focus, and confidence right now, but here's the catch. It's all borrowed. And trust me, your brain is a loan shark that will always come to collect. Let's start with the one we all know and love, caffeine. So its promise is to wake you up, right? But what it's actually doing is hijacking your brain and blocking the chemical that tells you you're tired. It's not actually creating energy. It's just putting a blindfold on your exhaustion. The peak hits fast, and yeah, you feel focused, you feel motivated, but the price is that crash we all know, when all that sleepiness comes flooding back at once, making you feel foggy and irritable. We all joke about, "Don't talk to me till I've had my coffee," but really, that's just withdrawal that we've dressed up and called a morning ritual. Now, nicotine is interesting because it's a real trap. The promise is this feeling of calm. You get the super fast hit of dopamine, you feel focused, and the stress just seems to melt away. But here's the thing, that peak is incredibly short. We're talking minutes. And as soon as it fades, that calm flips into tension and restlessness. So the crazy part is, nicotine doesn't actually relax you. That feeling of relief you get from a puff, that's just you satisfying the craving that the last puff created. It's a cycle. Cocaine just cranks that whole process up to 11. Its promise is an immediate, overwhelming wave of euphoria. It does this by basically putting a dam in your brain, stopping dopamine from being reabsorbed. So at the peak, you feel absolutely untouchable, brilliant, electric. But your brain is just burning through its pleasure fuel at a totally unsustainable rate. And the price? A crash that is just as fast and harsh as the high, throwing you into anxiety, exhaustion, and an intense, gnawing craving as your dopamine levels just bottom out. It literally rewires you to think that the drug is the only source of pleasure left in the world. And then there's methamphetamine. The promise here is an absolutely explosive surge of dopamine and adrenaline. The peak is just pure, raw intensity. You feel completely invincible, totally unstoppable. But the price, the debt, it's one of the most severe. The crash isn't just a few hours, it can be days of deep depression and paranoia. This is that loan analogy in its most extreme form. Meth doesn't create any energy, it just steals it all from your future, and it charges you an absolutely brutal interest rate. Okay, so let's shift gears. We've talked about the uppers. Now let's move to the downers. These are the substances people often turn to when they're just looking for some quiet, some relief from all the noise. But the silence they offer, well, it comes at a cost. Because they don't just dull the pain, they can end up dulling life itself. Alcohol is, of course, the most common downer. It promises this warmth, this relaxation, a little boost of social confidence by basically pumping the brakes on your brain. At its peak, your judgment starts to fade, your coordination gets a little sloppy, but here's the real deception. You still feel like you're totally in control. The price, as I'm sure most of us know, is the hangover, which is really just a complete system crash in your brain's chemistry that leaves you feeling awful. Opioids promise something else entirely, total relief, a complete escape. They block all pain and just flood your brain with euphoria. People often describe the peak as this deep, heavy calm, almost like being wrapped in the world's softest, warmest blanket. But the price is just devastatingly high. The withdrawal is so brutal it can make just being alive feel unbearable without the drug. Opioids actually start to rewrite your most basic survival instincts, tricking your brain into thinking the drug is as important as food or water. And then we have benzodiazepines. Think of these as the mute button for your anxiety. They work by boosting a chemical called GABA, which, just slows everything in your brain way down. At the peak, your thoughts get quiet, your muscles relax, and the world just feels kind of soft and far away. The price? Well, your brain gets lazy. It gets so used to this artificial calm that it basically forgets how to handle stress on its own. This makes dependency a huge risk, and the withdrawal can actually be pretty dangerous. All right, on to our last category, the mind benders. These substances are different. They don't just speed you up or slow you down. They can actually rewrite reality itself. They can throw open the doors of perception, for sure. But as we're about to see, they don't always close those doors so neatly on the way out. Let's start with cannabis. It promises a pretty pleasant distortion of reality, right? Time seems to slow down, your senses feel sharper, everything's a little bit funnier. The active chemical THC taps into your brain's own system for managing mood and how you perceive things. Now, the peak can be this really dreamy, creative state, but it can just as easily flip over into paranoia. And the price is that kind of lingering mental fog that can make it tough to get motivated and can definitely mess with your short-term memory. MDMA promises one thing above all else: connection. It just unloads your brain's entire supply of serotonin and oxytocin. Those are the chemicals for happiness and social bonding. At its peak, you feel this profound, perfect empathy with every single person around you. But the thing to remember is your brain is literally burning through all of its feel-good fuel in one go. And the price for that is a deep emotional crash a day or two later, this feeling of emptiness. Because that perfect connection, it was chemical, not personal. LSD promises something even more profound: the dissolution of your own self. It works on your serotonin system to completely reshape perception. Reality starts to bend and shift, and at the peak, which can go on for hours, the very idea of me or I can just dissolve. The line between your thoughts and the world around you gets incredibly blurry. The price is that slow, often unpredictable journey back to reality, which can leave you feeling either totally refreshed and rewired or deeply anxious. Psilocybin, from mushrooms, works in a really similar way. The promise starts with your senses sharpening. Maybe patterns in the world start to shimmer a little bit, but at its peak, your whole perception transforms. The key thing here, though, is that mushrooms don't really show you something new. It's more like they pull back the curtain on everything that's already inside your own head. And because of that, the return to normal can feel peaceful and insightful. But just like LSD, the whole experience is completely unpredictable. And finally, there's ketamine, which is a dissociative. Its promise isn't connection, it's disconnection. It works by blocking sensory information from reaching the conscious parts of your brain, so the world starts to feel distant, kind of dreamlike. At its peak, some people experience a total detachment from their body, what's often called the K-hole. The price is a slow, foggy return to reality, and with heavy use, it can start to disconnect you not just from your body, but from meaning and emotion itself. So, there you have it. The uppers, the downers, the mind benders. And as you've probably noticed, the pattern is always the same, isn't it? There's a promise, there's a peak, and there is always a price. For every single chemical action, there is an equal and opposite biological reaction. The brain always sends you the final bill. And this table here, it really lays out the final accounting. Just look at how the substances that directly hijack dopamine, your brain's motivation and reward chemical, like cocaine and opioids, have an extreme potential for addiction. Now compare that to others like LSD that work mainly on serotonin. It all just comes down to the kind of chemical accounting that's happening inside your brain. So in the end, everything comes right back to where we started: homeostasis, that relentless, unstoppable drive your brain has for balance. It means for every artificial high, there's got to be a corresponding low. There's really no such thing as a free lunch in neuroscience. The brain always pays its debts. So the only real question left is, what kind of balance are you choosing?